Good morning, everybody. This is Guy Schrader from Naviant. Welcome to our OnBase Solution Spotlight for the month of December. This month we're talking about the OnBase Advanced Capture module. So without any further ado, we're going to get moving here. Again, I'm Guy Schrader. I'm Manager of Sales Engineering with Naviant. For those attendees on the phone, I recognize most of the names. I believe that I've met most of you. A few logistics as we go through the PowerPoint here. Everybody is muted on the GoToWebinar, so if you have any questions, please use the chat box that's available through the GoToWebinar panel that appears. Please type your questions. I'll try to field all the questions at the end of this webinar. And there's also going to be a survey at the completion of the webinar, so please complete that to provide feedback for us for what you might want to see for future OnBase Solution Spotlights, as well as the PSG support webinars that we conduct. So briefly, the agenda. We're going to fly through this relatively quickly. Talking about OnBase Advanced Capture, I always just like to pose the questions and try to answer them for you. What I typically hear about different modules is, what is it? Why do I need it? What does it do? Give me a demo. Why should I choose OnBase in this particular scenario versus some other third-party application that has similar capabilities for advanced capture? How much does it cost, and how do I get it? So we'll just dive right on into it. So what is it? OnBase Advanced Capture really allows us to bring that automated data extraction to users directly inside the OnBase interface. And that really allows us to then classify and index our documents, minimizing the amount of time that's spent by your personnel instead of them manually entering all of that keyword information. The OnBase Advanced Capture module is doing that. So it's accurate, very fast. Obviously, we're talking about structured business documents here. I do want to clarify that. This is not designed at this point in time for other types of documents where the structure varies from one document to the next. A really good example of that is accounts payable invoices. As you receive a vendor invoice from your different vendors, the format is different. We're really talking about here within the context of advanced capture structured documents where the information is going to be in a predictable location on every single document. So it's accurate, it's faster than manual data entry, and all things said and done, we're not eliminating manual effort in indexing these documents, but instead we're really redirecting those individuals to provide validation on questionable extracted pieces of information. OCR and technologies like this are not perfect, so there are going to be some exceptions that the system is not confident enough that those individuals will now be looking at that information, providing some human insight behind that document, and manually correcting only those fields that the system was questionable with. So some of the key benefits. We're going to go ahead and minimize the time spent indexing. So your resources are ultimately going to be going down. We're going to improve that indexing versus manual data indexing, and the accuracy is also going to be going on up. We're going to get those critical documents into the system much faster by enabling that automated indexing. And finally, we're going to go ahead and eliminate some of the duplicate systems that have historically been out here. If you really wanted to do this in the past, we could. A lot of these OCR systems were available, but they really were third-party applications that needed to be redundantly configured to work with OnBase, and it really is a second application that needed to be maintained. So that effectively is going away with this OnBase component of advanced capture. So in summary, we have less effort, improving our accuracy faster, and it's less complex than other solutions that might be out there. So just some graphics here to really give you an idea of what it's doing. Being able to scan documents or even bring in PDF documents that you might be receiving electronically, the system is going to be identifying the document type, performing what we call classification. So that's that approval that we see in pink on that particular document. That's identifying this as an Ohio application for building plan approval document type. And then once we've identified the format for this particular document, we're applying zonal OCR and other types of technology to read this information extracting information off that page, and then populating OnBase keywords. In short, that's what the technology is doing for us instead of having an individual manually indexing that information. Digging a little bit deeper into this, again, we're extracting data from these documents to populate keywords, and a few different technologies are being utilized here. I wanted to highlight some of those as we go through this. So OCR, again, a term that a lot of people might have heard of before. It's optical character recognition, where the system can recognize computer-generated text that appears on the documents. So using this application for building plan approval document, we're able to read the County of Cuyahoga. We're able to take that CPA number that appears there and now populate OnBase keywords. That's optical character recognition. Comparing and contrasting with OMR, object mark recognition, we're talking about reading checkboxes or fill circles that you might have on some of these different documents, and then again populating OnBase keywords. So in this scenario, you have that field number 6, that type of project where there's multiple checkboxes. The system's going to read that and recognize there's an X in the new building construction field, and then we can populate the appropriate OnBase keyword. Or the scope of project where there's multiple selections there. Building general and phase plan review would be populated within this particular document. Barcodes. OnBase, we've always been able to read barcodes for a long time if you have the appropriate licensing and or COFAX VRS. But now these barcodes can also be configured and read directly within the Advanced Capture solution. So reading that barcode value and extracting the contents of that depending upon the barcode format that was actually used on that particular document, again, populating an OnBase keyword value with that information. Signature detection. We're not recognizing who signed the document, but we're just now checking to see whether in the signature area, whether somebody has placed enough ink, all things said and done, to denote that a signature does exist on this particular document. You can think of that very important situation like in packing slips. Did somebody sign for this document coming on in? Or the documents where it's not a legal document until we actually have a signature on the document. Nobody's really going to be able to validate that that individual signed it besides start doing some comparison of against signature cards or other things like that that you might have. We can also perform line item extraction. This is something that's relatively unique of OnBase in that we can take a look at table information that appears on documents. In this case, we're looking at a transcript that's coming in to a university, but we can read different columns within this document and now start populating different OnBase keyword values. In a situation like this, we're typically using an OnBase multi-instance keyword group where we have like the course number, the course name, the grade, the earned credits that they receive for that particular course, and extracting that information appropriately, because a lot of these tables and the table data that's in it can vary in length. We might have 1 line, we might have 50 lines. OnBase is smart enough that it can recognize that and extract all of that information. OnBase also does have something called ICR, and that's intelligent character recognition. In other words, recognizing handprint. There is additional licensing that's necessary if you have to recognize handprint information to extract that and populate keywords. So in this scenario, that employee code, as well as that workstation name, that could be recognized. Now do note, and this goes somewhat into your form design, that there's individual boxes for individual characters here. I think everybody's probably seen that in the past, but no system is able to really recognize cursive writing very well. If you can separate the individual characters, ICR technology does relatively well in recognizing that and populating and converting that to computer-based text. So the setup of this, all things said and done, is that we're going to be defining different templates in the system. And once we've scanned some examples of these different templates, we'll start configuring different zones on that template to better recognize that document. For starters, we need to do what's called document identification. All things said and done, how are we going to classify that document? What document type does this belong to? And in this example, and this is an actual screenshot of the OnBase Advanced Capture configuration screen, you see the three different fields there that appear in a purplish pink hue. Those different fields are being used for document classification. The approval, the Highland software, the form number that appears in the lower left-hand corner. We draw these zones larger than the text because the document can move around a little bit, but anything that's found inside that particular zone matching the text is then saying this is now being attributed to identifying this particular document. Once we have the document classified, we may want to employ something called page registration. Think of it this way. When you print something off of your computer to a printer, depending upon the printer that you actually print that to, there might be a little bit of a scaling issue. Things might be a little bit larger or a little bit smaller depending upon the printer. If you ever take that piece of paper and now photocopy that, the photocopier isn't making an exact copy. Sometimes it's a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. Maybe it's shifted on the page, left or right or up or down. We need to utilize some page registration there to account for some of these scaling or movement issues. So what we're doing there is now taking any of these different components. In this case, we're just utilizing the Highland software in the upper right-hand corner. We're looking at that form number in the lower left-hand corner within these page registration zones, defining a registration point so that after we've identified that document, now we can look at those registration points. We typically have more than one on a document so that we now have a point of reference. Is this an exact match in the size and the reference to all of the information that's within those page registration zones? Is it off a little bit? If it's off, the system can now account for that, maybe shrink the template ever so slightly if the document's a little bit smaller than the template that we're using, or expand it or shift it left, right, up, or down, whatever the case might be, to more properly recognize all of the different components that are going to be configured within the keyword zones, which is the next component here. So as we set up our keyword zones, we can truly use specific zones exactly in this XY coordinate. We're going to read everything that's in that particular field, or we may be able to employ a tag. Maybe I'm looking at a date field, and that's always prefaced with date : I'm looking for any date value to the right of that. That may work very well also. Or we can start using some regular expressions. I'm always looking for information that's going to be 4 digits in length, numeric only. Or maybe it's going to be A through Z, special characters, maximum of 10 characters, things like that. It's getting a little more advanced. But looking at some of our different keyword zones here, Cuyahoga, that architects, the estimated construction costs, the signature area, those are all specific keywords that we're configuring here. So there are some additional options built within the system which are nice features that they've added. We can redact information after it's been extracted. So think of sensitive personal information, Social Security numbers, credit cards, so on and so forth. We may need that as part of our business process or to populate another database elsewhere so we can extract it. But utilizing the separate license for automated redaction, we can go ahead and extract that redact that information automatically through the advanced capture engine so that now it appears as black or potentially white over that information so that other people viewing this document later don't see that sensitive information. We can also do address parsing. So think of addresses as you see that information. You may need to store that strictly as street address, city, state, zip, so on and so forth, but it never appears that way on documents. You typically see a block like we see in the lower left-hand corner here for the phone shack, 5546 South Street in Westlake, Ohio, 44145. Well, OnBase is able to take a look at that entire block and say, all right, take the street address information and put it in this particular field. Take the city that's now parsed out of this and put it in this field. State, zip, so on and so forth. So it's a nice capability. We're doing that without any custom scripting or regular expressions, but that address does need to contain all 4 of those items: street address, city, state, and zip. There's also a lookup and replace feature. So think of it, if you're getting documents being submitted by a number of different people, they're never going to be consistent in how they format some of these free text responses that you might have. A really good example here is something like net 30 days, or all the different variables for the terms that might be included on a document. Here we can always standardize that and say, you know what, if I ever see net 30 days, or net 30, or net 30D, or something like that, 30 days, whatever the case may be, we can now normalize that data as it's stored inside of OnBase as a keyword just as net 30. So it's a lookup and replace feature, all things said and done. Now it's time for the demonstration. So let me go ahead and dive into my demonstration system. And I already took liberty here of scanning a document within a batch. And probably the first thing that you're going to notice here is that we are using native OnBase document imaging. Forgive me for the pause. I just need to rehydrate a little bit. I'm doing all the talking here. You're doing all of the listening. But this is fully integrated within all of the OnBase capture methods, so we can still capture it in whatever format that we want to, whether it be production document imaging, a desktop document imaging, it could be disconnected. Really makes no difference. It could even be ingesting documents through Outlook integration if you receive things as an email. There are workflow capabilities to say take a document that doesn't have index information and now push it back into the advanced capture system so that we can apply the template, see whether we recognize the document, and extract the appropriate information. So all of those capabilities are there. So here you can see that we have now a new queue called awaiting advanced capture. And by the way, this is typically configured where the OCR engine and the advanced capture components are truly running on a server. But we will have to add within our scan queue the additional step of pushing this document through advanced capture. Those document types going through specific scan queues, we have to say, yes, this has to go through the OCR process, where then we can go ahead and identify the appropriate document type and extract the keywords. So, but just to take a look at this document really quickly, here we can see it's our AP direct pay form. There's some structured information on here. We have some table information. Really quickly, I have no keywords populated on this document, like normal, what you would expect after you first just scan a document and haven't provided any indexing information. Within my demo here, I have the ability to go ahead and just perform this advanced capture processing. Normally, this would happen automatically behind the scenes when you have the server component configured. So again, that server would be beefy to have all the capabilities to run through a number of documents very quickly, because OCR is very CPU intensive. Now that I've run that batch through, notice it's no longer awaiting advanced capture. It goes through the normal process like it normally would. If, by chance, the OCR engine was 100% confident in everything that it read off of it, we classified the document properly, it recognized all of the keywords appropriately, it would just go down to awaiting commit, like it normally would, completely hands-off. But if there's any fields that cause the document, cause any of the documents to fail for whatever reason, it's going to come down to index in progress, where we can then go ahead and index that document as we normally would. So you'll see a few different changes here as I take a look at these documents that went through the advanced capture engine. I just want to go up a little bit here. Again, we've automatically determined that this is an AP direct pay form, so it was able to classify the document as that direct pay form using the configuration. But now as I go through these different fields, and I just want to get back up to that barcode, a couple things happen. For starters, you can see that my office location was populated with the true alphanumeric value that was extracted from that barcode. I have a snippet of that barcode or the region that was extracted right above it, and on the document itself, we zoom into that region and it highlights in yellow what was actually extracted. So there's some barcode recognition. Here's the date that was extracted. Notice it was able to take the date and change it into the appropriate format for how we store it inside of OnBase, so we can convert things like that. I'm just going to start rolling down through this like a vendor number. Here we have a checkbox that was checked off. So notice we populated that as rush. That's really a configuration item. We don't just say yes or no for things like that. We can say, if it's checked, give us this particular value. If it's blank, give us this particular value, or maybe even leave it blank, whatever the case may be. So here's the reason why this document ultimately stopped. Notice that my department number is highlighted in red over here. Again, I have the snippet, albeit I'm going to admit this is not the perfect demo because that's truly a font that can be found in probably many Windows workstations within Microsoft Word, but think that this is handprint, that we could recognize that information. The system just was not confident enough in what it extracted. It was correct, but now we're presenting it to somebody to manually verify. Each of these different fields, as we set them up, we are able to configure that confidence threshold. Is this good? Is this not good? So on and so forth. So just to roll through a few other things to highlight, here's that address parsing taking place. Notice we have the whole address block, but we're able to parse out within my street address, 28500 Clemens Road, into the city, Westlake, Ohio, 44145 for my zip code. So that's your address parsing at work. Phone number, there's a reason. Okay? Again, that's a zone between all of the different checkboxes up here where the first reason is populated with employee reimbursements. Again, that's what I've said when this particular field is checked. So I move down, there's another one. So I created a second instance of the reason keyword, and now marking that as marketing trade shows. Here's name parsing. Similar to the address parsing, depending upon who fills out that form, they might fill it out last name, comma, first name. They might fill it out first name, last name. So we've built into the technology the capability to parse that out into different discrete fields, John as the first name and Adams as the last name. I just want to use this one as an example here for some different technology. While I actually did recognize this appropriately, say it didn't recognize it. What I have the capability of doing inside the OnBase system, when I have Advanced Capture here, is to draw, using my mouse, a zone around that particular field, and if I remember my proper capabilities, when I release, it does on-the-fly OCR, so it recognizes what was within that particular zone that I drew around that particular value and populates that field. That's now ad hoc Advanced Capture taking place, which is oftentimes supplemental to Advanced Capture. There's my signature detection. Notice it says that it's signed. It was confident in that. It's not appearing in red, but look at where that zone is. We're over the top of this gray area, so there's a lot of black pixels that are being picked up. The lines are being picked up. All things said and done, I need to back that out, but that's a configuration issue. That's always probably going to come up as signed because that zone is a little too large. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So the date that it was signed, total amount. Now I'm getting into the table information. This is a multi-instance keyword group, so we're picking up the account number. We're picking up the type of expense. Notice it came up as EXP, but we're converting it to expense. So it's not quite that search, that find and replace capability, but we're able to go ahead and define that. Sales, for training, for a conference, the dollar amount, and then we repeat that process through all of the different columns that we have. But notice how this appears. This is a multi-instance keyword group for the direct pay forms account information. Okay. For time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and index this document, and it moves down into waiting commit like normal. Let's talk about the configuration relatively quickly here. When I have a batch and I've scanned it into my scan queue that's configured for this Advanced Capture, I now have the option to come in here and configure the Advanced Capture for those documents. There's a lot of features and functionality within this, but all things said and done, we ran this document through the sample that I was running through in a batch and applied the template to it. So there's a bunch of information here, and again, in interest of time, I don't have the opportunity to go through it all. But here, this is now my form identification piece. So anywhere that I find inside this zone the word of pay form, we are matching this now to this particular template. Okay? When this template is designed, I have the whole form definition where we're saying we're assigning anything that matches to this to the AP Direct Pay form. I'm not going to go through all the details here. We'd be here for a couple hours, frankly. But everything is configured here through point and click here. Selecting on that barcode, just to go through some of the highlights of this. Notice I have multiple different tabs here for the type of information that we're extracting, but ultimately I want to get back text here. I'm populating the office location keyword. I'm looking at the entire zone, and for my recognition, I'm using a barcode engine. Here's all of the different engines that could potentially be used inside of the Advanced Capture module here. Looking at a few different fields here, like this checkbox for Rush. That's an object mark field. We're populating the keyword type of status. If a positive result is found, there's a check in there, we're going to mark it as Rush. If nothing is found, we're going to mark it as nothing. I do have the capability of testing some of these different types also within here. You can see here it says object mark zone is checked. Applied keyword value would be Rush, so on and so forth. Highlighting a few different fields here. Here's the ICR component. So we're still looking at text. We're populating the department number. We're looking at the entire zone. We are only allowing special characters of 1 through 9 plus 0, but you can see the advanced recognition is my handwritten ICR. So we can restrict potentially what's being found. The reason that we do that is because we don't want any zeros being read as O's or any ones being read as L's or I's potentially. So on and so forth. So it really kind of gets back into that configuration. Here I just want to show that address extraction. So I take a look at that particular zone. Again, we're looking at the text field, we're looking at the street address, but since I've now specified that I want to be using address extraction within here, we're also asked which keyword are we populating with the city value, with the state, with the zip code, so on and so forth, and we're still using OCR to recognize that information. Something just a little bit different here is I take a look at this group. So the system is capable of reading the entire group object mark field. Okay, so we're still using OMR technology, but notice we've now checked this OMR item group with our different subsections here. And if I select each one of those, you can see the snippet over here showing me the zone inside there that we're looking for, and then what the positive value should be populated for the reason inside of OnBase. And again, we have that test capability. I just want to address this really quick. This is that field for our signature detection. Okay, so we're just populating signature detection field, populating the sign field. If it's positive result, there's a signature, we're going to call it signed. If there's nothing there, we're going to call it not signed. Okay, and I can test that right away here. It says, oh, it's positive. Well, again, we saw that before that this was a false positive, that I can actually come in here and resize this zone. In this case, I want to make it a bit smaller, so you can see how we can start drawing our fields a little bit smaller. And frankly, I'm going to go even further and put it above that particular line. Okay. Now I can come back in there, modify the zone one more time, test it. It says, oh, it's negative. It would be not signed. So that gives us some immediate feedback as we're testing this document directly within the configuration. If you've looked at some other third-party packages, it's nice, it's condensed, it has a lot of things configured directly into it to perform a lot of those common functions, so it's not as cumbersome to configure going forward. So hopefully that kind of gives you a relatively quick feel for what the module looks like. Let's go ahead and finish up the PowerPoint and hopefully save a few moments for some questions. So why would you want to choose OnBase versus some other packages? Again, there's other packages out there. I don't really want to name any by names, but there's a number that are out there that have been on the market for decades. You're talking about one system. You already have OnBase, just support OnBase. You don't have to worry about another application to support. You don't have to perform dual configuration. If you're using another package, you have to configure that package. You also have to configure OnBase to accept those document types and build some processor in between, oftentimes document import processor, to be able to ingest that. So the complexity is a lot higher with some of these other packages if you have documents that really meet all the requirements for what OnBase can perform. So you're leveraging your existing investment also. You already have the OnBase scan licenses. If you went with another package, you oftentimes have to purchase additional scanner licenses, so now you have redundant costs. There's a bunch of additional features in the OnBase system, such as the address parsing, that lookup and replace, as well as table extraction. Different systems have varying capabilities to be able to perform that. And really one of the keys is that in OnBase, there's no volume restrictions. A lot of these other systems charge you effectively by the number of images processed. If you process 100,000 images on an annual basis, that's a whole different pricing structure compared to 10 million documents. OnBase, one flat fee, as many documents as you can process through that single OCR engine, go for it. There's no additional fees. So what does it cost? It's a $25,000 license per concurrent instance. Okay, it's just some technical verbiage, but all things said and done, you're saying I want a server doing this OCR processing, that's one license. I can have as many scanners as I want, capturing these documents, pushing them into the scan queues that are configured for the OCR processing. Again, it's centralized. There are some other related modules. Obviously, your production document imaging license, you need to have some method of capturing these documents. I showed you briefly, excuse me, that ad hoc advanced capture where I could rubber band around that information. That is an additional module that you can choose to purchase if need be. There is also an intelligent capture for accounts payable. I didn't want to really spend any time on that particular module. It uses some of the similar technology, but it is very specifically designed now to go outside the realm of all of these predictable documents and be able to, with a high level of confidence, extract information off of varied documents coming from different vendors in the accounts payable world with a lot of those common fields that you would need to capture. We may highlight that in the future. And barcode recognition server may come into play here also if you are recognizing barcodes on those documents. I showed you very briefly that automated redaction of information after it was actually extracted on the document, so that's also a related module. So to get it, contact your Naviant account executive. They'd be more than happy to arrange some time to talk through things. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to take a look at your documents to really see whether OnBase is a good fit for it. You know, it's not a magic bullet for everything, but there are many, many scenarios that work very well to be able to capture documents using OnBase Advanced Capture. So that leaves some time for questions. A couple questions came up. What is the best file type for indexing? Text, PDF, JPEG? All things said and done for this advanced capture component, you do need to have the document either as like a TIFF that's being captured through the scanner, given it could be some other image file type, including a PDF. Text documents, this will not work. It has to be an image file format. If you have text, that would be more going back to cold type of technology. We would like some overlay practice sessions too. Okay, thank you for that feedback. We can take a look at that as we go along here. I'm not quite sure what you mean just by overlay practice sessions. It sounds like more cold and or placing a scanned overlay image on top of text documents and or some other file formats. Well, if there's no other questions, I will allow you to continue your day. I just want to go ahead and quickly plug for the next Naviant support webinar, which will be coming up in January. I do believe the date is January 21st, but that has not been confirmed yet. But the next session is going to be titled Dashing Through the Snow on a Unity Form. So even though we're post-Christmas at that point in time, we're going to be talking about how easy it is to create Unity forms, how you can leverage signatures as well as some different expressions and rules inside of Unity forms, and how Unity forms can be utilized inside of workflow to really change your user's experience. So with that, I will leave you. Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you for attending. And again, at the end of this webinar, please complete the survey that should be popping up in your screen. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to everybody.